All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our DueNorth Summer Update 2018. We have muted everybody, so that way there won't be any interruptions. You should be hearing my voice and looking at my desktop at the time, for the time being. Christy is monitoring the chat window for this session. So if you are a remote visitor and you have questions, please put them in the chat, and Christy will kind of compile a list of things that we can talk about at the end of the session. If you are having trouble with audio or can't hear me for one reason or another, please let Christy know as well, and I will slow down or recover whatever it was that we missed as far as audio goes. We are recording the session as well, so that way when we do get to questions and the like, behave yourselves. What I mean is that this will be available as well for the folks who weren't able to attend, and so this can be used as a training video in the future as well. So thanks very much for attending. What we would like to talk about today is the summer update features. So the summer update features included a number of things that were identified as features and refinements by the committee that reviews the DueNorth stuff. It's our automation committee. One of their functions is to look at DueNorth and monitor DueNorth's usage and make some decisions about what features are being utilized, which are being underutilized, and what could be added. We did a survey this spring that gave us a lot of great feedback about how that's done, about what's being used and what people thought were of interest. And so this summer update reflects a lot of those changes, okay? And so what we're talking about today is those changes. There was a handout, I believe Christy sent it out as part of the email for the folks who are operating remotely, and our in-studio audience here is getting a copy right now as well. So the big things that are in this update that we'd like to talk about is, first of all, the task-oriented borrower and lender screens. So if you are in a DueNorth window right now, there are two new options which have appeared on the screen. The idea is that these screens, the borrower task and lender task, will eventually replace borrower history and lender history. I think we've kind of decided at this point that we're going to hold off on making it mandatory to use the task screens until everyone's had a chance to kind of disseminate these changes to their people. So that way those folks who are used to the borrower history and lender screens as they were can still use them for a little while before we transition onto borrower tasks and borrower and lender tasks. Both of these task screens are designed to be easier to use, and so we're hoping that people will look at them and go, hey, and jump right into them, okay? So let's talk a little bit about what these things look like and what they were created to address. First of all, one of the feedback items that we heard about DueNorth was that those borrower and lender screens were information dense. There was a lot of stuff on those screens, and if you knew what you were looking for, you were okay. But at first glance, they could be overwhelming. And so part of the redesign here was to make it easier for folks to just look at a glance and get an idea of where your requests are in the system. The other thing that we heard a lot of is that it was very hard if a library had more than one person who was responsible for dealing with ILL tasks, because then it was hard for them to know, well, did the other person do that or get that thing done, get that book sent, handle that item, that request? And so it was very hard to kind of see and understand that. And so that was part of what we built into this one, was the idea that it's easier for a multi-person staff to be able to kind of handle where things are in progress. So those are kind of the big ones on there. We also incorporated a lot of little interface changes that were asked for into the new screens to make it a little easier for folks to be able to see. So what I'm going to do now is kind of walk through the new screens so you get a feel for how they work. We're going to do a whole transaction from start to finish, just so you get an idea of what it looks like. The idea behind this is it's supposed to be a little bit more like a workflow and a little less like just a giant list of requests. And so hopefully this will be a little easier for people to wrap their heads around, okay? So I have a transaction that we're going to engage in. Let me make sure I've got my stuff together. So I have created 2 demo accounts. We're going to do a live transaction and cancel them after we're done for the session. One of them is going to be as the North Country Library System. Thanks, Marcia. The other one is going to be as the Potsdam Public Library. And the reason I'm using Potsdam is I know that they have this particular book as part of this, and I've already kind of cleared it with them, but they're aware that they're going to see a transaction that we're going to cancel pretty fast. So here we go. So we're going to start as the borrower, okay? In this case, I'm pretending that the North Country Library System is really interested in getting a copy of Nemesis Games by James Corey. It's part of the Expanse series. The reason I chose this book is I'm obsessed with this series at the moment, so I apologize in advance for my, let's call it, obscure tastes. So I'm going to search for Nemesis Games, which is one of the books in this particular series. And so we're going to go into this, and I'm going to limit it specifically to NCLS, because Potsdam is part of the NCLS system. So here is my list. Hitler. Crazy. Now we're going to go into the Expanse, which is the correct one for this set. So this is the Nemesis Games, and you'll see that it's available at Potsdam at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and make that request. So all of this is exactly the same as it always has been. We haven't changed anything about this particular interface. So Potsdam Public Library is going to be where I'm requesting it from. So we go ahead and click Submit. Now the usual things occur here. Before, it would generate an email for the lender. It would generate an email for the borrower. So both of those libraries just received an email that contains, for the borrower, it contains a little bit of the thing saying, hey, you just requested. And then for the lender, it's that same email with the, are you going to be able to fill this request? Yes or no. So I'm going to go ahead, because this is still the borrower, and we're going to go ahead and have a look at borrower tasks. And that's super fun that it didn't show up. Interesting. Don't you love when things go according to plan? Let's have a look and see in the borrower history if it shows up. Sure enough, it does. All right. Thanks for following through my first failure on this. So what should show here is it should be exactly the same information as this one. We'll get a chance to look a little closer at that transaction log when it appears. Love best laid plans. So let's have a look at the lender side of the fence. So I've swapped over now. This is a Potsdam Public Library demo account. And we're going to go into lender tasks. And it looks like this. So the idea behind all of these new screens is that the idea is that it looks like a to-do list. It's a task list of things that still need to be done. In this case, new shows up with flames because there's now a new request waiting for an answer, meaning that they want an answer about something. So I'm going to flip over to that, and you'll see here's the book. So we're going to talk about some of these features in just a minute. You will note at the end here, the status is listed as waiting. In the old system, it used to put yes or no here, and it used to confuse the heck out of people. And we're not going to have that same status information anymore, meaning it's going to be very clear about what it is you're supposed to do with it. And in fact, if you look, it says the status is waiting, and the actions are yes or no. Are you going to fill it, or are you not going to fill it? Let's look at some of the other features that happen to be on the same screen, because that's on the list of features that we have here. Let's go all the way down to the very beginning. You'll notice at the beginning, the ILL now is a hyperlink. And the reason that it's a hyperlink is because it will pop a new tab, and the new tab has all the information about this particular ILL request, the borrow information, the lending information. And at the bottom, if there are any notes available on it. Okay, and you'll notice that we have a public note and now a private note. If you are a member, a staff member for the library, whether it be lender or borrower, and you've added a private note to it, you can see the private note. However, the other member of that, the borrower if you're the lender, or the lender if you're the borrower, the private note doesn't appear to. So that way you can put into it notes about that particular transaction that you need to have internally, but won't display to the other library. This kind of addresses the need that folks had for putting information attached to that transaction, such as who the person was that they were lending, the patron that they were lending to. When we look through the notes on DueNorth, we see an awful lot of people who, as the borrower, put into that note, they put things like, you know, Johnny Jones and their phone number, or Jones and their ID, you know, their library ID, or something to that effect. What the private note will do is allow you to keep that information, but not necessarily display it to the other library. Okay. So that's available here, and you can see that it's got all the information, the status, all of that, as well as where it's going to, and also the email addresses of the folks involved. So you can actually click on it from here and open up an email and start writing an email to those. So I'm going to close this tab to go back to the main screen. You'll notice that next to it we have a happy little printer icon. And what that printer icon allows you to do is pop open a print screen, and the print screen creates a printable form. Now, this is kind of like a pull slip, but not completely. And it's also kind of like destination routing slips, but not really. The reason for it is because we're dealing with so many different systems, and the rules about how they transmit books back and forth between systems varies from system to system. We tried to make this generic enough that it could be used for multiple purposes. So the top of the screen of this particular request contains things like the request number, the title, all of that good stuff, as well as the call number and location. But the bottom contains what we call tear-off slips. So in this case, the bottom, the very bottom one, is the destination, the place where this book is going to go. So if you're about to mail this book, or you need to mail this book, you can actually separate off the bottom of that form and use that as the mailing label, meaning you can cut it off and tape it right to the front of the package. We also tried to include as much information about the system as well in that, so that way it could be routed depending on the system. I know this works better for some systems than others. And then you could shove that pull slip at the top, what's left of the piece of paper, right in the book and send it to the destination. When the destination gets it, they can hold on to that piece of paper if they wish. That was usable in some systems where that seemed to be a situation where it was nice to have a piece of paper to say, oh, this book came in. Then the bottom can be ripped off again, and that one used as the return label to send it back to its original destination. So hopefully this will be of use to some folks, and it was one of the requested features. So I'm going to close that back out, and that was available right from the print icon. So in this case, in this particular little demonstration, since this is the lender, we are still in the lender side, I'm going to go ahead and say yes, I'm going to lend this book. So I'm leaving a note, and this is, by the way, a public note. So let's go back to lender tasks again. You'll notice when I go back to lender tasks, there's no longer a new. The flames are gone because you've put out the fire, it's moved on. But now if you go to open, great. It's supposed to be on the open screen, everybody. So anyway, I wonder why it worked in testing and then not now. Interesting. So anyway, it's supposed to show up here. And when it shows up here, it's supposed to have some more information associated with it. I'm going to kick over to complete so you get an idea of this. So this is what it's supposed to look like when it appears in open. So we're going to pretend like this is the Expanse book 5 or 6, whatever it was I just chose. So the idea is when it arrives here, this is almost like a to-do list. The idea is that the book is here. You have answered that you are going to send it, but it is now currently unsent. Okay. You'll notice that it's got the same ILL link. You'll notice the same printer appears, but now there's a little comment bubble. And all that's there to do is to remind you that there is in fact a comment or notes associated with that particular book on the screen. Okay, so that's a little reminder that there's comments to be had. Okay, so let's look across the end and go down to our end actions. So it's unsent, meaning that this is a book that we've said that, yeah, we're going to fill it. But then we've got some actions associated with it. The first one at the top is mark the book sent, meaning that we've actually now put that baby in the mail and it's gone, or put it in the van and it's gone, whatever it happens to be. And we'll click on that in just a minute. The one beneath it is answer no. So this is still the ability for that lender to back out, because we still have folks that will get that email that says yes, no, and they immediately click yes, I will send it, and then they realize the book is missing, not on the shelves or somewhere else inside process before they get a chance to answer on it. So if they click mark sent, they get the lender public note, and then they get an opportunity to tag it with a private note. Send it at whatever point, loaned with whatever particular options. There's a lot of different notes that could go into that box. So we say submit, in which case now it disappears from the open list. It's gone, okay? Because as far as DueNorth is concerned, you've done your job. It's gone, it's out, okay? Now, we're assuming, of course, that your ILS is going to be your primary way of tracking this book. Really what DueNorth is here to do is to help you connect with a possible borrower, okay? And so at this point, once you've sent that book away, it's really on your ILS to keep track of where it is, meaning that if the book comes back on time, you check it back in, all is good and lovely and wonderful in the universe. If the book doesn't come back in time, you generate your overdue in whatever fashion is common for your system. So that's the idea behind that. The screen complete then now collects all the transactions that you have finished in some way, form, or another. Okay, so the transactions that could be completed is if you decide not to fill it, when you say no fill, it appears on this screen, which is why these guys appear here. If you decide that you've sent it, the book appears here as well, meaning it's already done and gone as far as you're concerned. You'll also see, as you go further down the list, there'll be things like expired. If you let the thing expire, it will automatically move from new into the completed section because you're done with that particular transaction. So that's all of those. Let's look just for half a second at the next actions available on these. You still have the ability to add a note to a particular transaction, and that's true of all of these, okay? The other thing too is that if you discover, oops, I didn't actually send that book, it needs to go on the to-do list for whoever the ILL person is. You can actually mark it unsent, or if you have a broken screen, for instance, that doesn't give enough correct response, it will move it back onto the open screen. So that way it goes back to being kind of on the to-do list for open transactions. But wait, there's more. Let's kick back over to the borrower for a second. Okay, let's see, borrower tasks. Let's look at the completed transactions for just a minute. So normally, open here would have that Expanse book that we were just talking about, but unfortunately it's disappeared for some reason. I'll check that. But it goes back to the complete screen. Let's look at the completed transactions, and you'll notice it has most of the same things that you're familiar with seeing before. It's got the comments and the printing and the ability to look at the transactions, the full record as you go. But we've added some things to this end. The first one, and I think that's the interesting one, this addresses a need that some folks were talking about. If you have a transaction which has expired, or was a no-fill, you actually have the ability to search for that title again. When you click search again, it will feed that title back into the search engine again, so you can begin a new search for new requests. The original feature request, I believe, is that it would drop you back into the request itself, you know, that same book, same title, all those available libraries. But the technical end of it to make it work was really, really difficult, and probably outside the scope of the changes that we were willing to make. So at this point, it's kind of an easy way to kickstart the search again, more than it is a drop right back into the same requested libraries. So that's a feature that we now have. You'll also notice that over here we have mark arrived. So the idea is that you can actually move it back into the last function as well. As far as, and let's kick one back so you get a feel for what it is. So say, for instance, I tried to request this book and it actually showed up here, unlike the Expanse. This is what you'll see. You'll see, let's kick it even farther back. My apologies that it didn't work the first time. Evidently, we need to clear it up. So when you first borrow a book, what it'll appear here as is you're awaiting a transaction, you're waiting an answer from the library. If they say will fill, it will appear here in this interface as being will fill, which is great. So now what that means is from a transaction standpoint, from a task standpoint, you're sitting here waiting for the book to actually physically arrive, meaning it's in the mail someplace, you're waiting for it to arrive. When it does arrive, you can actually click Mark Arrived, in which case then it shows up on your list. Now you're still in open, meaning the book is now here, it's arrived, and you're going to do something with that book. Give it to the patron, send it to its next location. Do what it is that your ILS and your system mandates is the next step. Then, once that book comes back from the patron and you're now done with it, you want to send it back, you can actually package it up and send it via whatever method that you normally do, and then click Mark Returned. In which case then you can say, oh, it was returned on whatever date. Okay. And then it disappears from your open list because now your job is done. The book has now been sent back to where hence it came, and it's no longer your issue because it's moved on to your complete set. So the idea is that basically we're creating a situation where each of those steps separates those requests out. So as a borrower, there's really the books that you will see here, the requests that you see here, will be ones that you are waiting for them to arrive. There's no answer. You're waiting for them to arrive. And once you've marked them and you've returned them, they disappear. So really, only the books, the transactions that are open appear here for you. They disappear into complete. And the same is true on the lender tasks. New only has new requests that are waiting for answers to be here. Open has only the requests that you have yet to actually send the book. Once you've sent the book, it disappears into your completed pile. And so it makes it a little less overwhelming. The idea is that each of those stages has just the things that need to be done or that you need to keep track of before they move on to the next stage. Part of the reason why we had the new have flames and be highlighted is because we do have a quantity of people that never check their email. They purposely ignore the DueNorth emails as they come in. Instead, they once a day or once every other day log in and actually look to see if anything new has arrived. Well, this makes this interface, makes this easier for those folks to be able to see. And also, if you're in a library with multiple folks responsible for ILL, if there's something in the new, that's a cue to whoever's looking at it at that moment. Hey, I should do something about that. And then on the open screen, it provides almost a task list. These are a list of transactions we have not sent yet. Hey, perhaps I ought to print out a list of these and go. And you can just print the screen as it is, and it'll give you a list. Perhaps that's a feature enhancement. And then from there, once those books are ready to go and you've sent them out, you can mark them as we've sent them out, and they disappear from the open list. That gives your other ILL person, hey, there's nothing open. I'm done with DueNorth for now, and they can move on. So the idea is to give it a little bit of a flow, so that way things move on, and it's a little less of an overwhelming pile of just requests that they have to look at and try to visually decode and figure out what to do with next. Okay, so I think I've covered most of the borrower tasks and lender tasks. I've also covered the simplified screens. We took those notes off of the main page, so that way you're not looking at all the notes, and moved them so that way you can see that there are notes available, but you have to drill in to have a look at them and see what's going on. We also, now the pull slips with the integrated delivery slips available right from the screen. Anywhere you see a printer icon, you can click on it. And we also incorporated the private notes, so that way you have the ability to leave information in DueNorth for your own library that's visible to your own folks. So that's another feature also answered for. I think that's all I have as far as the steps involved. Christy, do we have questions? And if not, I will open up some questions for the folks here in the room as well. So, yes?
I noticed that you had a task not arrived. The book.
Yep.
How long should you wait before you put that? Or
well, that's entirely up to you and how you want to follow up on that. In the old system, in the old way, you kind of had to watch for them and decide what you wanted to do. There is always, with any of the books that are being borrowed or lent, there is always a link, so you can click on the email, pop open an email, and send them. So if a book doesn't arrive, as a borrower, the book never arrives, there's a place there that you can send them an email note and be like, so.
We had a question, how long do the completed transactions stay in DueNorth, which is forever?
Forever. That actually leads me to one small tweak that I should mention. And this is a very small tweak. The borrower tasks and lender task screens both have this pull down that tells you how many days you'd like to restrict it to. This no longer resets to just a default that I've chosen. Instead, it defaults to a setting in your own account. So let me go up to the top here where it says My Account. And so this is Edward Demo. It's our demo library. But you'll notice at the very bottom there's a new option that didn't exist before called Filter Days. And it's set for our friend Edward here to all. This allows you to choose what the borrower tasks and the lender task screens default to for their setting. Okay. I generally always set them to all because then the completed screen shows me everything rather than having to kind of think, oh, wait, was that more than 14 days ago or not? This is available as an option. So if you want to, you can set filter days to 14 days, in which case you're really only seeing 2 weeks on those screens. But it's up to you and how you want to do it. The default right now is set to 30. So what that means is that if you don't set the settings in one way or another, you're going to see 30 default on this screen itself. Okay? So it's up to you and your users to go ahead and set it if they want it different in some way. Okay.
And then we also had do we still get the emails for requests?
Certainly,
yes.
Emails for absolutely. We did not change anything about the email requests at the moment. They are as they were.
That's it.
Very good. Anybody else from things out here? Yeah.
So I'm a lender. I lend a book to another library, they mark it received when the book arrives, and they mark it returned when they're sending the book back. Is the lender then obligated to mark the book received at the very end of the process when it's completed?
Nope, because your ILS will keep track of that. When that book arrives, you'll scan it, shelve it again. So DueNorth is really only concerned with the transaction, not necessarily the item itself.
Can you go back to the lender history? What's wrong with that? Or, I'm sorry.
For the lender task?
Sorry about that.
Yep.
Lender task. And go to complete.
Yeah.
So the different sorts that you have, sent, not filled, expired.
Yep.
Is there a way, and I guess it goes along with what his question was, is that as a lender, if a borrowing library said that they returned it to me, but yet I don't get it, and I don't get it, and I don't get it, can we add another one? Another selection for the display?
Well, we really wanted to make this as hands-off as possible.
Right.
From the standpoint of your borrower may never mark it as returned.
True. We can use, you're right, and we can use the ILS.
That's what we're hoping for, is that the ILS itself will kind of track that.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you explain again about the completed request and researching the book, like researching the book?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Let me swap over to borrower for just a second. So at the end of the request process, so it is possible there are situations when someone is going to say no to your request. You've made a request of a particular library, and either they've said no, which is a no fill, or they've let it expire. They've let it run to the end of the 5-day window. And at the end of the 5-day window, the system will automatically mark the request as expired. In those two cases, over here in the completed section, you'll see the name of the book, the transaction request, and then you'll see search again. And all this allows you to do is to click on it and immediately have it jump into search, which is a title search. You'll recognize the syntax if you've played with the advanced search at all. It puts the title right back in and searches for the title again. This is just like you were starting from the beginning of the search. All we've done is more or less saved you the effort of having to type the name of the book back in again and do the search again. You'll still have to apply whatever filters and faceting that you want on this particular search. It just makes it a little easier to go, oh, that request expired. I still need that book. Let's go find it again from somewhere else. I hope that kind of answers the question on that. Anything else on the chat line? This is weird.
No questions?
All right, any questions from you folks? I apologize for that broken request. It's weird. The test one worked and the other one didn't. That's great.
I can vouch to that. Okay, so it says yes, thank you. That is a good feature. Do you want to talk about those other ones?
Yes, okay, so Christy's got a few additional things. You want to come up and talk about those?
But when is this expected to go live? That was one of the things we were going to mention.
Well, that's a great question. It depends on how long until I can fix the thing. The other thing, too, is that we kind of want to give a little bit of a warning lead time to folks as well, rather than just yanking the old screens out of existence right away. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions.
Well, I wanted to ask, will the transactions from the old screens be underneath?
Yep, absolutely. All the transactions are still available. And in fact, that's a really good point. I right now have marked all will fill transactions as being sent if that was ahead of July 15th. So stuff from last fall are marked sent as far as anyone is known. The other is on the other side of the spectrum as well. They've been marked as returned as well if they're older than that. there really hasn't been an awful lot of transactions between July 15th and now. This is a fairly quiet time before the school library systems come back on board. So that's where things are now. I don't anticipate mass marking anything unless there's a need to do so.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, another question.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about workflow and people skipping steps. So as the lender, you say, yes, I will fill that.
Yep.
And then the next step is to market shift. If you forget to market shift, does that impair the ability of the borrower to receive it?
No, there's no direct interaction once that the same steps still apply as the old DueNorth interfaces. So once you've said yes, they're aware that you've said yes, but that's all that they know. We didn't really want to keep status tracking in DueNorth, and so this is a way of allowing a little easier workflow and a little easier understanding, but not necessarily informing the other library of every step in between. And in fact, the new borrower tasks are really optional at some level. As a lender, if you don't ever want to mark anything as sent, you don't have to. It'll just continue to fill up and you're open. Maybe at some point, if that becomes an issue, we'll kind of set a routine that auto marks things after a certain number of days. I'm not looking into that right away. Let's see how people use it first, and we'll go from there.
I have a question.
Sure.
Does the timestamp date ever change, or is that just?
That's the moment that the request was created, and it's always there. The reason for it is because everything is timed on top of that same date stamp. So the expiry warning that comes after 3 days, and then the actual expiry occurs based on that date. So that date never changes. It's always fixed.
It would just be kind of nice, like if somebody had said they returned it, if that time stamp date changed, so then you knew when they returned it.
Right.
When to start getting for.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we didn't feel that it was DueNorth's responsibility to keep track of status of things. Really, DueNorth is about enabling the ability for you to borrow and loan with a person that isn't physically standing in your library. It's a communication system more than it is a tracking system. We're not tracking. I keep saying this to folks. We don't track materials. We track requests. We're handling the requests. We're not handling the materials.
Okay. So we'll talk more about when we want to go live as we know more about training. I know NCLS has their training scheduled and some of the schools. Yep. So we'll communicate more and talk about that with the other systems too. There's just a couple of things we wanted to remind in general about DueNorth. About the closing feature when your library is shut down for breaks or renovations or things, to be sure to close the library and then reopen when it's available again. Also staff replacements, like if you have turnover at all. I know this doesn't affect you.
And for anything else, doesn't matter either.
No, but for schools, especially with aides and things that are moving around, if you have a list of people that aren't in your system anymore, we can take a list and bump everyone out, move them.
And it is possible for you to manage that as well.
Yes.
You have the system staff screen, which has manage users on it. You have the ability to search for users and delete them as well. Deleting is done by editing the record.
So
and then all the way down at the bottom, there's a delete button.
Here's edit, and then if you go down here, it says cancel account.
And canceling the account doesn't do anything to the system, meaning that if the account has been used to request 100 books, it doesn't matter because the name of the person is embedded in the record. So even if the person doesn't exist in the system anymore, we still have the record involved.
It just allows, it just is a security thing. They can't get in and make any requests anymore and stuff like that. Not like anyone.
I mean, there's a lot of malicious book loan borrowers out there.
And then also with training, if you need help with that, let us know because we can always facilitate help in that.
Yeah, be happy to. Marcia had a question.
Oh, Marcia.
Are you going to do some of the video training and stuff like that? Have that available?
We certainly can.
I can write one up and do one where the transactions actually work.
Yes.
Let's do that.
Yes, we will come up with one and we'll put it on our YouTube thing.
Are you thinking about doing like short video?
We should.
They break it out into little
Yeah, I
smaller
was-
sections, so.
Like
I
we
think
did with
we
the
can
original
talk
ones.
through the workflow, but do one video that's just the borrower side. So it's in your
Right,
head,
so
Yeah.
just as a borrower.
Right.
And then do another one where it's the lender, but just the lender, so that way it's in your head.
Yes, because all the videos I did last summer
I know.
are kind of done. It's a good experience though. So,
It's the nature of software development.
yes. Okay.
Update the documentation. all
So
the time.
with the whole adding new people, deleting old people, if you want to send a list, you can. Otherwise, feel free to take care of them yourselves. And then I also wanted to mention that Opals
Oh my goodness, yes.
is on board.
Two
It's
two very exciting announcements. Yes, Opals is now fully compatible with DueNorth, so we have status information from Opals. Also, Clinton Essex Franklin Library System, their system is now fully compatible with DueNorth, so we have availability on them. And as
And
a
wait,
surprise
there's
bonus,
more.
wait, there's more. A surprise bonus. Now Fort Drum is back into the fold. So
Yeah.
they are enabled as a lender moving forward. So it's very exciting to have now all of the systems fully supported in DueNorth. We're very excited to have everybody in and working.
Yes.
So
I was just checking to show off the.
The Fort Drum, is that an update to the email we received saying they?
Yes. Please disregard their previous email.
I had that to go over with someone, I'll go rip it up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Please disregard that.
Now these mean
Okay, so with Opals, availability is done on a raw count. As long as that number is a positive number,
Mhm.
that means that the book is
they're
present.
there.
Okay.
If it's a zero,
If it's a
not.
0 or a negative number,
Yeah.
it means the book is not there.
Yeah.
So when you click on request, we will auto filter out those appropriately.
So like if you hit request, it'll show you available.
They'll show up as being available.
So to our locations, our varying locations that we have still, they will appear as a dash. That still exists, correct?
For North Country?
Yeah, do
Yes.
17 suspect.
Yeah, we haven't changed anything about the previous systems and how they were configured. It's just a difference in how that, and in fact, every
Yeah,
of
here,
us-
this is your guys'.
Yeah, every-
Ours is coming as dashes.
Yeah. And then this is
But Opals will have a number.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing that can be done about that. Every ILS system reports back their availability differently.
Mhm.
And that's why we have DueNorth set up to kind of filter that for you. So when you click on request, only the things that are available show up on that list.
Is there no way that if all of us give them like a spreadsheet, that could be kind of cleared up?
Afraid not. It's just
Because
one of
it's
the
live
limitations of
and-
how it's structured.
That's how it-
Yeah, we asked way back at the beginning of this process if we could normalize that display, and it's just not possible. So that's why the request screen itself filters out the ones that can't do. So, but it's great to have everybody on board finally. I know that for Fort Drum, this was a big deal. Wendy out there was really wanted to be loading. And I can completely understand. So she's now in the fold.
Yeah.
One of the questions that came up from someone is Opals. I'm not hoping you can hear me okay. Opals is the ILS. I didn't even turn it on. It's the computer that's talking. Opals is the ILS system that most of our school library systems use. Either they use it as a union catalog or they use it as a live updating ILS. So that's what that is. Sue asked, the handout that Christy sent as a PDF is kind of a great, like, here's the features and what they are. You can feel free to send these out to your people.
And we can make a copy available on the newsletter.
Right. We'll probably make sure that it gets advertised as well as part of the news. Good.
Mhm.
So, any other questions, concerns, issues?
I just have one other question.
Sure.
The searching catalog, we talked about those facets being not a kind of run-on paragraph. Go to one of the, let's just do a quick search, right? And scroll down to like the subjects. We were talking about changing that so that way we do an include and an exclude on the search limits. Is that?
We have not brought it up with index data again recently. I can do that because there was a little bit of a discussion about it. I think that also suffered from being in the transition period between Dee Bonner and Wayne, who is kind of our contact, Wayne Snyder,
Yeah.
who's our other contact. Let me bring it up again. Anything else? All right, very good, everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks to all our remote listeners as well. I'm glad you guys could attend. Thank you to the studio audience. Yay, studio audience. Yay. All right, thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah, so